All right, here's Bill Cilento, associate head coach, 13th season at Wake. He's had 65 drafts, 7 big leaguers, but worked with Coach Walter at UNO and came to Wake from Brown. But 9-0, so the Deeks are hot, and one more weekend before you get into ACC play. So, Bill, thanks for jumping on.
Well, it's a pleasure being here, and I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, you're my de facto home team because you guys are close. I see you guys the most. So,
Yeah, we appreciate it. It's good having you over, and it's we get a chance to have some of the best teams in the country roll through the couch and opportunity to meet with those guys.
yeah. How do you balance your family in season and out of season? You got 4 daughters. That's a lot. I couldn't even deal with 2. You've got 4. How are you handling having a family?
So they're heavily intertwined into our program. If you ask my daughters, they learn math by our players' numbers, right? What's Patrick Frick plus Stuart Fairchild? I mean, that's how they learned how to add to 9. So they're heavily involved. They're over here. They don't miss a game. We get free tickets, and my wife bought 2 tables outside. She felt like she needed even nicer seating than the free tickets that we get. So the balance is a challenge. My wife, behind every good coach is a great wife, and my wife is absolutely that. We have 4 active daughters. To give you an example, my one daughter was in a soccer tournament in Charlotte on Saturday. My other daughter was in a volleyball tournament in Greensboro, and we had a game here. And somehow my wife managed to get all the people to the right places and then still be here for the game. So
It's a little
it's a
bit of a
challenge.
throwback approach. I remember traveling. My brother and I played all kinds of sports. I remember traveling way more with other people's families than I did with my own family to events.
Yeah, for sure, and that's what we got to rely on. We're very fortunate that there's a lot of people in this area that have been very helpful for us. Um, so it's been a challenge, but it's something we tackle daily.
What about playing at Siena, coaching at UNO, coaching at Browns prepared you to be at Wake?
Yeah, I think I've had a unique perspective. At Siena, you don't get some of the luxuries we have at a place like Wake Forest. We're fundraising to kind of go on our spring trips, and each kid has responsibility to do that. I was also fortunate to play there, and I played for a guy who's been in it for 50 plus years at the same school. Dug in an era where people jump around from school to school to school. Coach Rossi has been there for since baseball was invented. I feel like, and he's someone that has been a tremendous mentor for me at every step along the way. He's someone that I run every life decision and every baseball idea by. He's adapted as the game adapted. And, his career, he took Siena from a Division III team to a Division I team, and I've gone from all ends of Division I, from Siena to the University of New Orleans, where it's high octane baseball, where your midweek games are schools like Ole Miss, Mississippi State, LSU, Tulane. To Brown, where you have an academic kid, you have a pretty cerebral kid, but you have a really driven kid. And to hear at Wake Forest, and to be here for as long as I have, 13 plus years at this point. I think I have a perspective that's unique in the fact that I've seen all ends of the game.
That's enjoyable, isn't it, with high academic kids? Because they're going to come in fairly motivated.
They're very motivated. I think the discipline that comes with an academic kid, translates to all parts of life. Now academic kids have their challenges, right? They tend to be very cerebral, but again, I think if you can provide a good structure for them, they can thrive in this environment. And if I'm being honest, I mean it's where I want to be. It's where I want to coach. I want to coach kids that not only want to be excellent on the field, they want to be excellent in the classroom. They want to be great citizens, and it's something we require of our kids on a daily basis.
How do you dummy it down for a kid that maybe is getting a paralysis by analysis?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to be very thoughtful with the information you do share. I mean, we're very fortunate here. We have several systems and a great analytics team, and you got to be very thoughtful with who and what you share with the player. And timeliness is very important to that. I think that's one of the things that I've learned along the way. You can have the best information if you're not timely with the delivery. It's useless, and it actually can be detrimental to the player. So I think the timeliness of it is the key. Um, I think as a young coach, you tend to want to do it when they struggle the most, right? You want to deliver the information that's going to get them out of it. And I think oftentimes it actually slows that curve down. I mean, I can just me as a player, me as a coach, me as a parent. I've learned my best lessons through failure, and I think players are that too. And I think if the player owns his ship and can get to the other side of it through the failure, um, I think you get a better product in the end. And I think when you try and flood them with information in that inopportune time, it can slow that curve.
Hey, how'd you get north? You're from Maryland. How did you? Most kids don't go north. They either stay around or they go south. How'd you get north?
Well, Coach Rossi, he's just he's an unbelievable recruiter. No, I had the opportunity to go 2 or 3 places. Had an opportunity to go right in my backyard. I think very early on, I wanted to be a little bit different, and I think I got lucky. I visited a bunch of schools, and I committed somewhere else basically in my mind for all the wrong reasons. I committed there. I walked around campus. I'll leave this school nameless. But I'm pretty sure I thought there was about a 9-to-1 girl to guy ratio, right? So I couldn't tell you what the baseball field looked like. I mean, that's all I cared about. And fortunately, I think they had some turmoil in their coaching staff. And I kind of sat back and looked at it and made a decision to go to Siena, mainly because I wanted to be different. I was a little bit agitated with how the recruiting process went for me, and luckily it ended up being the best decision I ever made in my life.
Plus, Albany's a good place. I coached there one summer, so I mean, Albany's a good town.
For about 2 months a year. For about 2 months a year.
I was there in the summertime, so it's good.
No doubt. No, I love that. I mean, I still have roots up there. I still visit every time I can, but man, it's a tough baseball environment. But again, there's advantages. It's every way you look at it. I think you get a chance to develop the individual a lot more because you spend a lot more time indoors. I think when you're outdoors a lot, you lose track of that, and you spend a lot more time on the whole. So, I think it made me a better baseball player going up there. I know it made me a better coach.
Were you a gym rat as a player? Because I kind of see that as you as a coach. Like you're always at the field. Like every time I talk to you, you're at the field. Were you that way as a player? Because I see you as a gym rat as a coach, and so I'm like,
I
okay,
was.
yeah.
I know you did the same. You grew up in the game, right? Dad was a high school football, basketball, baseball coach. Mom was a nurse, and she worked odd hours. She worked at I grew up in the DC area. My mom worked at Bethesda Naval, so she would work, really, really odd hours. So oftentimes when I was really young, I was just dragged with my dad. I got captivated with the game. I got captivated with sports. So many of the lessons I learned in life that helped me today came through sports. So yeah, that's who I am. That's kind of what I've become. I think my kids are the same way. I think there's so many lessons you can learn through sports that are lost a lot today with the instant world. So I wouldn't have it any other way. I believe it's helped create me and into who I am.
And Wake's probably not. I mean, if I think of Wake Forest, that's a white collar school. To bring that type of mentality is probably what the baseball program needs because you're bringing a way different mentality and culture than maybe what your guys are going to see around campus every day.
Yeah, and I think we look for that in the recruiting process a little bit. You look at some of the lineage of some of the guys we've had from a guy like Gavin Sheets, whose dad Larry played in the big leagues, and so forth. I mean, I think one of the core beliefs of our staff is we're not going to ask our kids to do something we're not willing to do ourselves, right? So I think that requires time, that requires being here, that requires you know, them seeing you face to face. You can say that, but if they don't see you every day, they don't believe it. I mean, that's just who it is, or what it is. So
You don't have some of the same financial aid advantages as some of the other programs you're competing against. I mean, and you have good players. How are you getting those types of players? Because you look up and down your lineup and your pitching staff, it's like, okay, there's a dude, there's a dude, there's a dude. How are you doing that with some of your challenges?
well, I mean, along with challenges, there's always advantage. We got a great school, right? We got a great, university and a great campus to sell and unbelievable facilities. We're very fortunate to have them. But sure, finances is one of the greatest challenges. I mean, I got 4 daughters, like we talked about earlier, and one of the first thoughts you have when you have a child, when you're in my profession, is what's school going to cost to send her to school, right? Not to mention the weddings when you have 4 daughters, right? So, um, how do we do it? It's all relational. Build relationships. I think that's the gold in today's market, right? In today's market, when you don't get what you want, you're trained at a very young age just to pivot, right? You see that in summer baseball. You see that in high schools now. Kids transfer from high school to high school just because they don't get kind of what they want. So our goal, and the way we go about it, is try and build relationships that last. Um, Whether we get the kid or not at Wake Forest, I want to be honest with them. I want to have them involved in the process. I want them to understand what the fit is and why I feel like we could be a fit, but understand and know that we might not be that. And I think that transparency, that honesty in the process, building that relationships, getting to know the people that surround and touch the player, I think is what the way we've tried to go about it. And I think we've been able to win some kind of recruiting battles because of that.
And that's why I was always okay. You hate losing kids, but if you put your best foot forward and you're honest, you're trying to develop a relationship and they tell you no, like it made it a little bit easier if a kid decided to go somewhere else because you're trying to do it the right way.
Yeah, and you believe deep down, you paint the picture. You let them know what the environment is. You let them know what they're coming into. So when that kid doesn't come to Wake Forest, maybe it wasn't just a fit for the kid, but more often that environment isn't what he wanted, right? And at the end of the day, if I'm going to get the most out of you as a player, if we're going to get the most out of you in our program, it's because the environment matches what you're seeking, right? That the structure matches, the organization matches what you're seeking.
I've seen you guys a lot in the last, 4 years, 3+ years. You always have good freshmen. I mean, what are you doing with those guys to get them ready? That's not an easy thing to do in the ACC. You guys always have good freshmen.
Yeah, I mean, I think opportunity is part of that, right? Like lots of programs have really good freshmen, but maybe they don't have the opportunity, right? So I think we've been fortunate from a recruiting standpoint to kind of map out where we're going to be in a certain year and bring freshmen in that we feel like could be ready. And to their credit, they've done it. They've come in and done that. Um, you can have the best development plans in the world, right? The best development is time and opportunity, right? When you think about it deep down, right? So we've been very fortunate to kind of have that aligned. And if I'm being honest, sometimes you miss. Like sometimes you think this kid is the guy that can come in and do that, and he isn't. But guess what? Somebody who you thought wasn't comes in and does that, right away as a freshman. So we try and be mindful that everyone runs their own race. Every player, you know, has their own time, time plan, but certainly try and map it out so that freshmen do get opportunities within our program.
And you guys seem like you're ahead of the curve on grad transfers. And
Yeah.
it does. Like you and I were talking about grad transfers, and I'm like, that's newish to me when I first moved out here. It seemed like you guys were a little bit ahead of the curve on grad transfers.
Well, without question, I think what a grad transfer can bring is a perspective that can change your clubhouse. If I'm being honest, right? That's what we've seen for the last 3 years. Grad transfers from mid-major or low-major programs, or even Division III programs. We had a right-hander last year from NYU who ended up being a huge bullpen piece for us. But they provide a perspective in the clubhouse that I think is is invaluable. It's worth way more in terms of wins and losses than anything they do on the field. Um, when you come from a program that doesn't quite get the opportunities that kids get at Wake Forest or high-end schools like this, to be in facilities on a daily basis, not even just the facility, but the work, the people involved in it, from your strength coaches to all that stuff that a lot of times they didn't have at these other schools. I think has been a great thing for us.
I recruited Mormon kids because of that. They'd been on a mission trip. They were old, this is a while ago, but you kind of knew what you were going to get out of them because they had been through it a little bit, had had some life experiences, and you just knew they were going to be able to handle themselves off the field as well.
Yeah, without question. I mean, the other perspective is you bring kind of the old man in the clubhouse, right? Like in it, when you think about high end college baseball, you don't have a lot of old men, right? Like if you do it right, your juniors are gone, and you lose them after your junior year. Well, you bring in seniors and grad students, and they become the old men. They become kind of the gatekeepers of your culture.
Is it better now with the transfer portal? How much time are you split in between that and then still with your high school kids? Is it a little bit better now with the transfer portal because you can kind of see who's available much more than maybe having to reach out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, look, I mean, I think if you want to play the long game, it's always on the high school end, right? The high school athlete, I do think, you can build foundations, you can build relationships over years. I think the danger in the transfer portal, the danger, when you go out and you just kind of rent players, is your clubhouse, right? And I'll be the first to tell you, we've had some really, really talented teams that haven't achieved in ways that we thought they would, right? And when you think about it every single time, it all boils down to that clubhouse and how they interact with each other and how they safeguard the environment. So we're always going to be a place that looks to the high school end first. I think we'll certainly look at the grad transfer market, every single year. And I think we'll use the transfer market to fill gaps. I mean, we're fortunate. We got 3 transfers that are playing really big roles from an undergrad standpoint. We also got a couple grad transfers that are playing really big roles. So, I think you need to mix. I think you need a mix of them all.
What do you wish somebody would have told you before you got into coaching?
Um, Slow down, right? I think when I first got into coaching, I wanted to have an impact, and I forced my impact on kids. I wish they told me just to take a deep breath, and slow down a little bit. I think as you get older, you get wiser. You see that. I think if we do our job right, we challenge them in practice on a daily basis, and then the game comes. And for all intents and purposes, you can sit up in the stands with your wife and kids, right? If you do it right, let the kids play. This game's built on players. It's built on kids. It's built on student athletes. Let them play. Let them be free in doing that. If I could go back in time and do it again, I would take a deep breath, because things are going to happen, and let them happen and learn from them.
Is that maybe what you do if you went back as a player, maybe ramp up the practice piece and try to just go out and play as a player, that you've
Without
learned that
question.
as a coach?
Without question. I'm a competitive person. I mean, if you come to our clubhouse, you'll see, I mean, every day a player gets a win and a loss, right? We intertwine competition in everything we do. If you go into our player lounge, we got a ping pong table. We got a standings chart right next to it. They play this game called Monopoly Deal. Now I don't know what it is, but there's standings next to that, right? Wall ball standings, right? So as a player, I think I was competitive, but I was really competitive on game day. I wasn't competitive enough in practice. I wasn't competitive enough in my preparation. So if I could go back as a player, I would get way more competitive on that end.
With your freshmen, is that an adjustment for them to see those standings? They probably might be the first time in their life they've ever seen standings with their name on. Is that an adjustment for your new players?
Without question. I think it's an adjustment for everybody. But what I think it does do when you track things and you do things, you bring you bring to the forefront what your value system is. Everybody understands what your value systems are. And you also bring to the forefront just the ability to compete, right? Like when you think about today's athlete grows up in a world where social media is prevalent and out there. When they face challenges, right, it comes from love, but parents tend to remove the challenge in front of them because they want to see their kids succeed. It comes from absolute love. And as we talked about before, I believe some of the best lessons in life, some of your most valuable lessons are learned through failure. So I think putting those standings up there, I think it puts it right in front of you, right? And it forces a little fight or flight. And if I'm being honest, like I told you, I don't ask our kids to do something I don't do myself. So I try and grade my day daily, whether or not I won or lost, right? By the impact I had, by the organization we had, by the practice we had, right? What was my win or loss? By the messages we delivered.
Is it
So
love or ego as a parent? Because for me, the love piece is, and this is hard, like the love piece is like letting them fail and work through things. And it's really hard. For me, the parents that I was around when my kids were coming out, for me, it was more of an ego thing for them that they didn't want their kids to fail.
without question, I mean, like I said, four daughters, two of them heavily involved in sports. Two of them are too young to be involved in sports, but I'm sure they will be, right? I think one of the greatest things you can do is release your kids to the environment, release your kids to the coaches, right? Like I try and sit back and watch as much as I can. And I don't get to see enough of it. My wife, unfortunately, I get a lot of the videos nowadays, but I try and sit back and watch. And I think one of the greatest things you can do as a parent is release them to the environment and let, you know, all I try and do is correct them when they try and put it on something that's not within their control, outside of their control. I just try and recenter them back to, hey, look, this is what you could do in that situation. And I think we've been fortunate, and our kids have grown in that environment. I think sometimes it's tough love, right? It's not okay to blame the referee. It's not okay to blame the coach, your other player. It's not okay to do this. I think that's tough love, but I think eventually that lesson sinks in.
How'd your dad handle you? Is that how your dad handled you?
He was tough. My dad, I don't think you were ever really good enough. I think that's a great
We
quality.
must have the same dad.
So, but here's what I'll tell you. Um, he was always there. He was always there to love you, unless you did one thing, unless you didn't go about it the right way or you didn't give effort. Right? It was never about the result. It was always about the process. And some of my toughest moments came to when I just didn't have a good process. Right? And in the moment, I didn't necessarily like it, but I'll tell you what, you look back, after time and every time that he was right.
Yeah, I've been on the high school speaking circuit, so I've seen some former teammates, and they're like, I get it now with your dad. I get it. I get it now how he was the way he was because he's created successful people. Didn't always like it at the time, and the words that came out of his mouth were a little rough at times, but it was the same thing. It was if your effort wasn't good, he was going to check you on your effort. If your effort
Yep.
was good, you probably weren't going to hear about it, but they're all to a man like, okay, yeah, I get it now.
Without question. And one of the coolest things, I mean, you get to see this, I'm sure you saw this with your dad, is just running into people you've never met in life. You don't know them from Adam, right? They see your last name and they tell you how big of an impact your dad had on them. Um, there's, those things to me are invaluable, and it's the things I cherish.
Who helped you transition the most from playing to coaching?
so, um, my first coaching job was American Legion baseball, Cicely Saxon, American Legion, Montgomery County, Maryland, and there's a guy, Kirk Crixton's his name. Kirk was a long time old baseball coach, old school guy in Montgomery County, Maryland. Now lives on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and I took a job. I got done. I took a job in accounting. I was doing accounting in Bethesda, Maryland, and Kirk was like, "Hey, just come help me with baseball." And I learned more in that summer than I may have learned in all of my coaching career. I mean, he just had a unique perspective, but the one thing he did was he could hold a kid accountable in a way that the kid didn't interpret it as being demeaning. Um, his mentality, his way of going about it was so unique. It's something I try and do now. I mean, every good joke's got a little truth to it, right? A little truth to it, and he was really good at telling the good joke with a little truth to it that got the message apart in a way that the kid could hear the message. So um, he was a big part of that. Coach Rossi was a big part of that. My first day on the job, he called me that summer and said, "Hey, you want to come back? You can be my recruiting guy. You can make $1,750 this year. Good luck." Um, you know, but um, but I'll never forget sitting in the office the first day, and I got a Word document, and this is when computers were just coming out. I got a Word document with my entire summer planned out by the day. Um, and at Siena, we had no budget, right? So I would get in the car, I'd drive 4 hours, I'd be in an event all day, drive 4 hours home, and then get up at, you know, 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and drive 4 hours the other way. And guess what? You better pack a lunch because our budget can't afford too many meals out. So pack your lunch when you're home.
Did he give you any stipulations when you went on the road as far as recruiting? Like, here's what you need to look for? Or did he kind of just let you do your thing when you went on the road?
So that's that was one of the greatest blessings in my opinion. He just said, look, this is what we need, right? And we need a shortstop, we need four pitchers, we need whatever it is, go get them, right? And just said, here's the events, here's the people you need to know at these events, go see them, go figure it out. And our first recruiting class when I was at Siena had John Lannon, who was a big leaguer, who I didn't think was good enough. Coach Rossi did most of the recruiting on. He's the opening day starter for the Nats, and it had about 7 or 8 guys that I thought were going to be dynamic and were dudes, and some of them panned out, some of them did, but he let me fail. He let me fail in doing it. He let me build the relationships, right? I'd never been on the phone with a recruit, right? And this is the era before cell phones, and you're getting kids on the phone. You're sitting in the office till 10, 11 o'clock at night, and you're building these relationships. And I think him, kind of taking the kid gloves off and just letting me go, helped shape me in ways that I'm forever grateful for.
What did he see out of him that you didn't see?
He saw big left-handed, and I looked at the radar gun. The radar gun said it was 77, 79. So we don't want 77, 79 guys, right? But big left-handed, athletic, competitive. You know, I think the one thing, that I think that's synonymous with every kid when you look back and you say, hey, this kid overachieved what I thought his talent was, right? And it's competitive spirit, right? And that's what John is, and John was super competitive kid, right? So, I think I missed the competitive part, and I think he was dead nuts on it.
With guys coming into the program, do you try to make any adjustments with them before they get there, or you just kind of wait and see till they show up on campus?
No, I think it's one of the things we try and do differently. We recruit kids earlier and earlier, right? And I think there's such an opportunity from the day they commit to you to the day they get there to help shape them and help have them be ready the day they step on campus. Um, so yeah, I mean, every day we're getting video from our kids, and every opportunity I can, once this quiet period ends, I try and get out there and see our kids. I don't do it at the sacrifice of our team. I think that's one of the things that we've done a really good job here at Wake Forest. I think we get in this recruiting world where it's go 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 go, and we've done a pretty good job of investing still in our program kids here. But every opportunity I can, I'm trying to go out there and see them and help guide them along the way. I think one of the greatest things you can help them with is just challenging them, right? Challenging them with specific things to do over the course of time, right? Whether it's challenging them to get to a certain weight or strength
Yeah, it
piece,
was a
or
life
whether
skills piece for me too. Try to help them get ahead of the curve for what they were going to experience on campus. I loved going to watch our incoming guys. I spent as much time in the summertime going to watch them as I did. And by the way, you're going to see a guy you want to recruit probably by going to see them as well.
yeah, 100%. I mean, look, you think
And by
about
the
it,
way,
right?
parents see that too. The parents of other recruits see that. Like, okay, they didn't forget about That kid's going to Wake Forest. They didn't forget about that kid. They're still watching him. He's already committed, and they're still watching him.
without question. And 14 to 17, 18-year-old minds, that's a key development time frame, right? So we try and do other things like, talk about reading books together, right? Having that shared sacrifice of our group. We try and interconnect our guys, interconnect our recruiting classes, so that they, when they go to tournaments, they're hanging out with other guys that are coming to Wake Forest. And what you find is the recruiting kind of it amplifies it. Everybody, who parents, players, other coaches see that, right? And you get, the advantage of similar and like-minded people.
What are your go-to books to recommend for incoming guys?
So we go the whole gamut. So last year we read it, we read it as a team. So we tend to give our incoming guys the book we read as a team. We read a book every fall. Um, last year was It Takes What It Takes.
I love that book.
But yeah, there's so many good books out there nowadays. I mean, everything from guys like David Goggins to you name it. I mean, we've kind of used them all. We've gone through, a dozen and a half books over the course of the last 4 or 5 years between our teams and our incoming guys. One of the things that we're starting to move towards too is there's so many good documentaries out there, right? Like the Tom Brady documentary, the Michael Jordan documentary. There's so much stuff out there about Kobe Bryant. I mean, success
Full
leaves clues.
Swing, by the way, Full Swing,
Yep.
phenomenal. The tennis one is phenomenal. It's the same company. I haven't watched Drive to Survive. That's the Formula One racing one, but the tennis and the golf ones are phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many good ones out there, and I think, the more what happens is incoming players understand what your values are. Hey, they're making me read this book. They got to share some of these values, right? Or your players, right? They're reading those books, and these are the values these are the standards, these are the expectations that a Wake Forest player has. So I think the more you can do things like that, and not for nothing, right? Kids don't read nowadays, right? It's all audio book, right? So anytime you can make them make that sacrifice and they can get invested in, it's just further invested in your program.
So with your development plan with your hitters, because guys continue to improve, guys are still putting up numbers. You look at your numbers right now; they're ridiculous, by the way. But you look at, like Brock Wilkin, I've loved for 3 years. He's just been steady. He's been steady, steady, steady for 3 years. Like, how do you keep him kind of moving forward,
Well,
or any hitter moving forward?
yeah, I mean, I think communication and is a big key to that. I mean, I think you got to set goals for them, and I think one of the things that we've done really, really well with our hitters is, two of the things I would say. Number one is we've built out routines that have helped accentuate what they do well and address kind of what they struggle with, right? And we've reevaluated that on a 6, 8 week basis, and then tried to continue to move forward. Um,
Because his setup's a
so
little different. He's kind of evolved. His setup, he's a little more spread out his freshman year, and he's kind of evolved into what he is. But the adjustments he's made from year to year, that's not an easy thing to do because pitchers figure out how to get you out. With Synergy now, they know exactly how to pitch you, where to
sure.
play you. Like, he's continued to improve. That's the thing that I've been impressed with him is he was a guy your freshman year, but he's continued to improve when guys know how to get you out and they know exactly where to play you now too.
Yeah, I mean, you get guys like him that are super invested in their own swing, super invested in Wake Forest baseball. Those guys continue to get better, and he's a sponge. He's fortunate. His uncle, he was from the North Carolina area. He went down to Florida to play for his uncle. His uncle Chris is a highly accomplished baseball coach at Bloomingdale High School. Was the Florida Coach of the Year 2 years ago. Led him to a state championship. Um,
Plays with a lot
so
of
he's
energy
got
too. He plays
lot of
with a
energy.
ton of energy.
Good people surrounding him, but more than anything, like with any good hitter, right? They take ownership. They take ownership of everything they do, and that's what he does. I mean, his work ethic's elite. I mean, give me a 3-star player with a 5-star work ethic over a 5-star player with a 3-star work ethic any day, right? That's Brock. I mean, he's going to show up every day. He helps set the standard for all of our guys. I mean, today's an off day, Monday, right? You go out to our facility, our hitting facility here, after 1 o'clock, you're going to have almost every one of our guys pass through there, right? And, on the field, I mean, our investment in ourselves individually is high, and when they want to be around here, that kind of snowballs, and it's great to watch. I mean, I get to be a spectator. If I'm being honest, I get to be a spectator in a lot of those things.
And you got
You
a lot
know,
of
and
different pieces in your lineup too. But for you guys, like your park plays fairly small. How do you know, okay, we need some action guys too to kind of set the table with all this? How do you fight that urge to maybe just try to get 9 guys in your lineup that can run it out of the ballpark?
yeah, well, so we had to learn that lesson the hard way a little bit. I mean, I think we, had a really good year in 2017, had a bunch of dynamic pieces, and kind of fell in love with a little bit more physical kid, and ended up being a little bit more, less athletic, more one dimensional, right? So, um, I believe my core belief, like you have to do what the game requires of you on a given day, right? And that requires different pieces. That it requires different abilities. You need to have every tool on your tool belt. You need to be able to bunt when you need to bunt. You need to be able to be low. You need to be able to run when you need to be able to run. You need to be able to defend the field, right? If you study winning teams in college baseball over time, right? You know, Pitching and defense has always
Even the
done
big
that, right?
leagues. I mean,
Yeah.
defensive efficiency. I put it when I talk on infield on the circuit. I pull up defensive efficiency for the big league teams. 7 of the top teams this year were in the playoffs that could convert outs that were put in play. Like that's always going to be the case with baseball.
Without question. And so we've made that a priority, right? To be dynamic, be different, right? And you'll see we got some guys who can really run at the top of the bottom. We got some more physical guys in the middle. Everybody wants the guy who can do them both, right? Those guys are hard to get. I mean, let's be honest, right?
They're in
So,
spring training
uh,
right now.
but yeah, but defend the field, and you're always going to give yourself a chance. Be able to throw the ball in the strike zone, you're always going to be able to give yourself a chance. Make contact, you're always going to be able to give yourself a chance. I mean, I think in a world where we accept the strikeout as just another out, I think you got a chance to be different when you don't do that. So that's what we try and do.
You've had 7 big leaguers, 65 drafts. How do you help players kind of navigate, especially going into that junior year of the noise of the draft and scouts?
I think you gotta start talking about it from day one. I mean, we do that a lot. This year we're junior laden, right? So spent a lot of time with those guys and understanding what it is. But here's the deal. Here's what I've found out in doing this. I believe that if you invest yourself in the programs, you invest yourself in the team individually, everybody gets what they want, right? If you think about it, everybody's in everybody's pockets, right? The better you are as a team, everybody wants winners, right? The better you are as a team, everybody, gets what they want from a draft perspective. And let's be honest, the goal isn't just to get drafted, right? The goal is to play in the big leagues, right? And let's be even more honest than that. The goal is to get post arbitration and change the course of your family's life, right? That's what baseball can do. Baseball can change the course financially of your family's life. So if you understand if you understand the big picture, I think you can make more sound decisions and it doesn't weigh on you quite as much.
How do you handle scout interviews? Because obviously you're going to get hounded, and they want contact with you guys. How do you handle that? Take care of it in the fall? Do you have leeway in the
We try to.
spring with those guys to try to be fair to the scouts as well, but also fair to your guys? Is it mostly done in the fall for you guys?
Yeah, we try to. We try and do, we send it out early on and we try and kind of the end of the fall after our fall season ends. I think we had like 26 or 30, kind of get that done. Had a couple holdover in the spring. Once our season starts, we try and avoid that part. But look, my goal as a player when I was a player, much like your goal, Ryan, was playing the big leagues, right? So, like, if you're not helping facilitate that in some ways, I think you're doing a disservice to your players. So we just try and be open and honest and try and get it done earlier. I think we're a pretty scout friendly program. If you talk to most scouts, they'll kind of say the
There's a
same.
lot there.
Uh,
They like you
yeah, no
guys.
doubt.
There's a lot there when I'm
So,
there.
um, I think I think that's our responsibility as coaches.
How do you know when to kind of make a tweak with a guy? You say you got a guy scuffling a little bit. How do you know when you're going to maybe try to tweak a guy a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the college model allows for development in a way that is very very advantageous, right? So if you look at the year and the periodization of the year, you have this summer segment, very easy time to make a tweak. You have the fall segment, right? You're not held accountable quite as much. You can play 2 games or maybe 3 if you've got a foreign game in there. But you're inter squad a lot, right? You have that ability in there. Then you have the winter time, right? Again, ability to do that in there. Then when the season hits, I feel like you got to shift and really be in competition mode, right? So very little tweaking during the season. I think your best value as a coach is to prepare your guys every single day as to what they're going to see, as to what people are trying to do against them, as to what they do well. I think that's my goal. If we got to tweak inside of that, removing competition, I think, is the key, right? You can try and tweak as much as you want. If there's competition, if they're still
The
held
bullets
accountable
flying,
to
you
the
got no
result,
shot. You got no shot when the bullets are flying.
100%, right? So I think it's mentality a lot when you're trying to tweak. If I'm being honest, I'm trying to help them. I kind of cope with it. We got a catcher right now, Bennett Lee, who I think is an exceptional player, transfer from Tulane. As good as it gets
He
as a
is
human
good.
being.
He's really good.
Can really, really receive. Didn't get off to the start he wanted to, and I told him the story of my senior year. And my senior year, I had draft expectations as a junior. Didn't come to fruition. Didn't handle myself well my senior year, and not coincidentally, I started the year 0 for 33. Right, my last game at South Alabama before I finally broke out, I hit a ball. I don't know. We didn't have exit velocities back then, right? But it was hit hard, and it was right on the right field line, and somehow the right fielder was playing there. It didn't make any sense to me,
I had a
and
scout tell me I need to hit for more power, and if you look at me, that was not. I'm coming off a 90 hit junior season, and so it took me half my senior year to get back to being who I was. It took me half the year, and just because I was trying to be someone that I was not, and paying attention to outside noise, I should have been like nod my head and be like, I'm going to go back to trying to score as many runs as possible.
Yep, and I think when you give players that perspective and be like, hey man, this is long, and look, I look forward to. I can't wait for the day. I know it's coming soon where you're carrying us through a series, you're carrying us through a week, right? And what you're doing defensively is impacting the game in so many different ways. And the best part about it is you continue to show up and you're the same guy every day, right? And giving them that perspective and that comfort, I think, is the best thing you can do.
Now in season, I think you guys do a phenomenal job with your in-season nutrition, training. Kind of go through that a little bit with what you guys are doing for your training, nutrition this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, so again, that periodization of the year, right? So I think when you shift to season time, right, nutrition recovery becomes paramount, right? You play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We had a 4-game series this weekend. We played a doubleheader Friday. We played a 6 p.m. game that got done at 9 o'clock on Saturday. Had to turn around and play a 2 p.m. game on Sunday. So not only is it about eating the right foods, it's about the timing of when they eat them, right? And that gets limited with when you play. So what used to be taboo, if you had food in the dugout and stuff like that, is totally different now. I mean, we bring out snack bins, and it's been my
Big
detriment.
smoothies, big smoothie program.
Smoothie is my detriment is the Uncrustable, right? Like I had a chance to coach with Team USA and back in the 17U team back in 2019, and that was our lunch. And since that day, I've kind of fallen in love with the Uncrustable, and the availability of them around the couch is way too high, right? So
My daughter said it the other day. She goes, "It's a shame Uncrustables. There's like 4 in a pack." She goes, "Why are they doing that? There's only 4 in a pack."
Yeah, we get the Costco version. There's a little bit more than 4. I couldn't make it on 4 in a pack, So it's but nutrition, like you have to be like hydration, a big piece of that. Sleep, right? Sleep is as important as anything when it comes to recovery, right? And then on top of that, I mean, I think one of the greatest challenges in keeping weight throughout the course of the season is the strength end, right? And being timely and thoughtful with that, right? We're playing 4 games a week. We're still trying to get into the weight room 3 times a week right now. Now, one of those is a mobility lift because it ties to our game, but we're still trying to get in there 3 days a week. And think about this, right? Your players that aren't your everyday players, if you're keeping them on that same schedule, aren't you really doing them a disservice? You're slowing their development. So we try and really individualize it and try and make it make sense for each individual, right? you know, it needs to be important. I think it's important to the high school athlete. I think it's important to the college athlete, and certainly important to the professional athlete.
What are some active recovery deals that you're having them do on an off day? I assume you guys are off today, or maybe not, because you guys usually play Tuesday. How do you handle that? Do you practice on a Monday if you're playing Tuesday and take Wednesday off? When are you taking your off days, depending on your
So
schedule?
we just shifted the Mondays off. So we have for about the last 5 years done Wednesdays off, right? Just felt like day before a game we won, and we've shifted the Mondays off, right, because of the recovery and more than anything. So um, we'll have I would say 95% of our guys will show up today and do something active. Whether it's swing the bat, kind of get out there and do some, defensive work on their own or whatever it may be. When we're getting the weight room, our strength guy, has some open hours where he does some optional stuff on Mondays, and certainly they're in the training room. I mean, I think when I look back at my time as a player, if you were in the training room, it's a bad thing. You were looked at like, hey man, like this guy's weak. And I think now it's more about the prehab room. It's not even really about the post.
I was
We
in
have a
there all
train.
the time. I didn't care. I didn't want to be sore. I wore poor Terry Collins out because I was in there all the time. But you know what? I played 4 straight years and never got banged up. Like I was in there all the time doing stuff.
Yeah, and I was the opposite. And I was fortunate. I just didn't get hurt, right? Just luck, right? Dumb luck. But now our guys, you got everything from, contrasting hot and cold tubs in there to, getting in there and
I would
whatever,
have liked playing in this generation from that piece. The training piece is way better now. All of it. The rest and
and
recovery's better. All of it. I like a lot of the new stuff out now.
I think the cohesiveness is the biggest deal. The
Yes.
cohesiveness between the trainer, your strength coach, your coaching staff, your nutritionist. You add in things like a sports psychologist. I think the cohesiveness is the key, and I think it's something that we at Wake Forest, spend a lot of time trying to use as effectively as possible.
Do you tweak pregame at all throughout the year? Do you tweak it depending on where you guys
Uh,
are at? Do you tweak pregame at all?
we try. If I'm being honest, I try not to. We do a little bit on Sundays. We don't throw as much. I do from a throwing volume perspective. But I think again, I think all good things are founded in routine, right? So I try and keep them in routine. You know, I tell the story. Before each game, we meet as a group and go over the scouting report, and I tell a story, right? And the other day, I told the story of Gavin Sheets. He made his big league debut that didn't happen. He went up to the big leagues and got called up and spent 2 days up there and didn't play, right? And they sent him back down. And after the game, I was there with his family. His family wasn't feeling very good, and Gavin looked kind of at him and said, "Don't worry, I'll be back, and I'm going to be back here to stay." And we talk about doing things conditionally, right? Like if I do X, if I play every day, I'll work hard, right? If I play shortstop, I'll have great energy. What was the message? And I think that's one of those things that I think you need to be mindful from a health perspective, and I try and be, very communicative with our trainer Jeff Strom. But I think if you can keep them in routine, you teach them that they shouldn't do things conditionally. How you feel, sometimes you got to act a little bit different than how you feel.
Yes, yes, for sure. That's a Goggins thing too.
Yep, for sure.
That guy never acts the way he
He's my
feels.
guy.
He never acts the way he's. I show one of his videos on the circuit for the mental peak performance stuff that I've got, and he's one of them in there because he talks about it. It's called hedonic adaptation. What do you do when you get used to something? You get the best job in the world. 2 weeks later, you're going to be tired of it. So how do you re-engage? Like he's tricked his mind like that. All that stuff doesn't matter. Like just go do it.
Without question, right? I mean, I think there's so much value in that, right? You play 56 games. Think about a big leaguer who plays 162 games, 161 games, whatever it is, 180 days. Right? You get 18 days off in there, right? Almost every one of those ends up being tied to rain because they're going to take the rest of them and throw it. Like, how do you do that? Like, you've got to train yourself to be at your best when you don't necessarily feel your best. And think about this: the playoffs at the end of the year, the World Series at the end of the year, right? Like, how can you feel your best at that time? You can't. But the ones that go into it, understand it, embrace it, they use it to their advantage.
Did your 7 big leaguers have that? Did they get that figured out in college?
Without question. I mean, I think that the one commonality you'd see with your big leaguers mentality, not talent. I mean, talent matters, but I've had super talented guys. The ones that have the mentality, those are the ones that make it. And almost every time, you can identify that when you're around them for about 6 months. I would say you identify it and you say, you know what, this guy's a big leaguer.
What would you like to see a little bit more out of the new kids coming in the program? I like asking this for coaches listening in. What would you like to see out of kids coming into the program that maybe they're not getting?
Yeah, I mean, I think the value in understanding what winning really is, um, I think is lost a lot nowadays. Right? We're in an era where in select baseball, for example, if you're a pitcher, you come in and you throw your 2 innings. So we put such a premium on exposure um, that I think we've lost winning. Right? So people talk all the time. There's this great debate about multi-sport athletes and why or why not and specialization, right? I think what multi-sport athletes do more than anything in other sports, they teach winning at a much more important level, or they put more of a priority on winning. Um,
And the practice
so
environment. I mean, you go watch a basketball practice, that practice environment, there's wins and losses, a lot of those going on. A football practice, same thing. There's a lot of wins and losses because there's a lot of one-on-one stuff, guys going after each other. Like you see a little bit more of that, I think, from a practice standpoint on those because those sports are conducive with their training. Yeah, I think you can do that in baseball with the training piece, but also travel ball is not training as much as they are playing.
Well, and there's an organization like you go watch other sports and I had a crash course in it growing up, right? My dad, that's what he did. You go watch basketball practice an hour and a half. It's the most organized hour and a half there is, right? A football practice, maybe a little bit longer, 2 hours, but super organized, right? I think in baseball, too many times we sacrifice organization and we just get out there and we just try and play and we take it by the hip too much, right? So I think the efficiency with which other sports practice is something we can learn a lot from in
Soccer
baseball.
also. Because I grew
Soccer,
up, I played soccer all the way through, and I like
yep,
soccer, and there was a lot of competing in soccer practice, whether against the
yep.
clock for running, or whether it was 3v1, 2v1, 4v1. Like there's a lot of competing going on in that training segment.
Without question. And I think if you dig deeper and you think a lot about it, right? I think it's one of the things that we lose a lot of baseball players at an early age because of, right? We're not as good with our structure. We're not as good with our organization as some of these other sports, and we don't compete as much. Let's be honest. Kids like to compete. Kids like structure, right? And we need to provide those things, right? Instead of just kind of doing what we do from a practice perspective.
Yes. Do you have any hitting absolutes, or do you have anything that maybe you thought of when you were a young coach that you don't believe in now?
Hitting absolutes. Yeah. I mean, if I'm being honest, I asked our guys to do 3 things, right? On a simple form, right? The first thing I asked them to do is to be aggressive, right? I think hitters hit. Um, so everything we do from the time they're 3 or 4 away to the time they step in the batter's box is built on being aggressive and the adversity that comes from being aggressive, right? I think there's 2 ways when you think about it to create a walk. One is you create some fear, right? You win that pitcher hitter confrontation. And one is the guy's just not good enough, or the guy just doesn't throw good enough strikes on that giving at bat, right? So I think be aggressive is something that's an absolute for me. Um, the second thing I asked them to do is kind of gear their swings towards the old baseball approach of just looking away and reacting to in. Right, we spend a ton of time. Pitchers pitch in more than they've ever pitched in today, partially because pitchers just try and outstuff you a lot now. We get so much stuff. Pitching has been ahead of hitting. However, when you get them to kind of gear their timing or gear their plan to looking away, um, they tend to spin the ball right a lot more. They tend to be behind the ball. They tend to make better contact. They're closer to being on time to the secondary stuff, right? So that's kind of absolute number 2. Absolute number 3 is like we talked about earlier, the 2-strike conflict, right? Can we win the 2-strike conflict over and over and valuing making contact with two strikes and not looking at two strikes as just another out. We don't complete outs at the college level like they do in the big leagues. And even more than that, if you can teach them to have some discipline and create some adversity in their takes with two strikes, I think you stretch a pitcher's you stretch a pitching staff
Because you
to
did
do
that
things
to
they don't want to do.
Crowder, Illinois guys. Great stuff. You guys just kind of wore him down and got him out of there because you had some competitive at bats. Even though you didn't have much to show for it on the scoreboard, that was a phenomenal matchup with him and Louder going after each other. But you kind of just wore him out, and then you got to the bullpen and you were able to do some damage on the bullpen, which is what's going to happen when you have on a Friday night. You're going to have to do that.
I mean, look, Illinois is, I mean, they're undervalued. Right?
They had a good
They're
weekend.
a good team.
They had a good weekend.
They're a good team, and their pitching staff is electric. They got some older position players. It was an absolute battle, twice, and they've done a tremendous job, in just kind of building, a program at Illinois that's not only
Dan is just steady. He just
steady,
he's
right?
just
That means
staying. Coach Hartlib is just steady. I love seeing him. I love talking to him. He's just steady.
Yep, and we were fortunate on that night. They're good, and like you said, we had a bunch of long at bats. We're able to get in their bullpen in the middle innings. We're fortunate that we played him early in the year. His pitch count probably wasn't built up to where it needs to be, and where it will be later in the season. So,
hey, you talked about two-strike approach. There's that fine line of it's still an aggressive swing. And maybe guys trying to feel for their swing rather than still staying aggressive. How do you help guys through that piece? Like, hey, it's still an aggressive swing with two strikes. We're not just trying to fillet the ball in play. We're still staying aggressive. How do you get them to kind of feel the difference between those two?
Yeah, no, I mean, I challenge them, right? Like we do two-strike BP almost every day in batting practice, right? And I get out there and, I mean, if you see me throw BP, I throw hard BP on purpose, right?
Yeah, you were lighting it up at UNCG.
Yep, and on top of that, when we get to two strikes, like I'm competing, and you're going to know I'm competing because normally I'm talking to you as we're doing it, right? And you're probably talking back at me, and that's okay, right? Like, I think creating some of that competitiveness in there is a good thing, and
I think it gets them ready for the game too. Like they're going to have to go out and compete here in about 40 minutes, an hour. Get some of those juices going before the game.
No doubt. And so, like, I'm trying to compete with you. So what do I have you do, right? At the end of the day, right? I'm trying to change your mentality. I'm trying to change your mentality so your thought process isn't, I don't want to strike out, right? I think that's what happens a lot, right? When people overcoach the two-strike approach, the mentality becomes just don't strike out, right? So what do you see? You see more passive swings, not only in two strikes, but you see more passive swings before two strikes. I'm trying to keep you aggressive, but I'm trying to teach you the zone so that you know when and when not to swing, right? Yes. If you want a superpower as a hitter, swing at strikes, take balls, right? That's a superpower. And I think the best of the best get really good at doing that.
Coaches that are trying to get into this thing right now that just start, I mean, you guys are on the forefront of a lot of the technology stuff. What kind of skills should they pick up right now to help them get into the profession?
Well, I mean, I think anytime you can get affluent at any of the new technology, there's so much technology out there, right? We're fortunate not only to have the technology, but people that help us learn how to use it, right? Like, I think we at Wake Forest are a little bit unique in that they're not ornaments here. We use them for all kinds of different things. TrackMan to what we do in the pitching lab to kind of everything in between.
My advice would be learn Spanish. That's all my buddies that are in pro ball right now that don't speak Spanish. They're Duolingo. They're trying to learn Spanish right now.
Yeah, and the one piece of advice I'd give them to them is don't accept everything as fact, right? Just because it's been done forever, dive into it, right? I think one of the greatest challenges now is we draw a conclusion and then we go searching for the analytic to support it, right? I see that all the time.
Confirmation bias. It's confirmation bias.
100%. So the other piece of advice I'd give you is just sit back and watch. The game will tell you everything you need to know. but you got to do it unbiased, right? You got to sit back unbiased and just watch the game. It'll tell you what you need to know. It'll tell you what you're good at. You want your resume as a coach? Watch your team play. It's that simple for me.
What are your initial reactions to the new rules that have been implemented?
So I love the idea of the time clock. I do. I mean, we at Wake Forest try and play very fast. Here's what I struggle with. I struggle with the inconsistency of how it's managed, right? So I think there's confusion on my part. I know there's confusion on the players' part.
And the umpires.
So, and the umpires' part too, right? We pop on what we're doing, and then you pop on spring training games here this week, and you got games ending on pitch clock violations and all that stuff. I think that the thought of playing the game fast is a great thought. It keeps kids engaged, much like we talked about at younger levels, our time being too much and discouraging kids from playing. The more we can play fast, the better it is for the game long term. Yeah. I do think we need to constantly evaluate how we do it. I think we need to constantly evaluate the safety of it. I'll give you an example. This past weekend, we had one of our guys. I mean, he's a guy on the mound, and we play fast, and he got 4 warm-up pitches. Is that really what we want? I think we have to have some feel in there on a cool night. That's not really what we want. So, I'm happy for them. Much like anything, the rules are the facts, and we got to play within them, and we're going to try and do that. It was
like the hit by pitch rule when it got implemented. Like it was a mess when it got implemented, but you just kind of dealt with it.
Yep. And I think what have we done with the hit by pitch rule? We've constantly reevaluated. Yep. We've changed it a little bit. And I think that's what we got to do. You don't know how the rule is going to work until you've done it over the course of the season. I just think the challenge is how do we have consistency in how we're going to interpret the rule.
Do you have any fail forward moments? Do you have anything that sidetracked you, or maybe you thought was going to sidetrack you, but looking back now was one of the better things that happened to you?
Yeah, well, look, I 14 years this is my 14th year at Wake, right? And my second year, I mean, I took the job here, and Coach Walter hired me, and I felt like I was ready. And year 2, I think we hit about 230 as a team. I did a poor job. I mean, I just didn't do enough. And the thing I look back and I say, I get a crash course every weekend. We got some of the best coaches in the country in the ACC. I get a crash course every weekend if I just sit back and watch what some of these guys do, and watch how they make their guys better, watch how they interact with umpires, players, other coaches, all that stuff. And one of my biggest fail forward moments, and it was that off season. I kind of looked at myself and I said, look, I've been going about this thing with just trying to impose my will on players, impose my will on the game, and just kind of sitting back and saying, look, you dummy, you got a crash course every weekend. Start observing. Go out and watch the other teams take BP. Go out and watch the other teams warm up, right? And talk to those other coaches. Figure out what they've had. And I think baseball and coaches in baseball are some of the nicest and giving coaches out there, right? Be willing to, pick up the phone and make a call to somebody and say, hey, man, I saw you guys do this. Explain that to me. So I think, it wasn't one individual moment, but it was that season that kind of brought that out in me.
Well, and you said it, like adversity is what teaches you everything.
Yep.
When you face adversity, It teaches you everything. And by the way, I stole a bunch of defensive position player throwing program stuff by watching what pitching coaches were doing on the opposing team with their pitchers for their pitchers warm up.
And if I'm being honest, at the end of that season, I was lucky to have a job. I didn't deserve a job, right? And so I think getting to that point where you got to self-evaluate. And I think the other thing that I'm very fortunate is my wife. We've talked about her in the beginning, but my wife she's a Long Island girl, right? And she's not scared to keep you humble, and she'll tell you. And I've been fortunate that she's told me a couple of times to kind of open my eyes. And again, you don't love receiving it in the moment, but she's right.
That's a be careful what you wish for thing. Like, everybody thinks they want this job or that job, but be careful what you wish for, because if you get it, then you got to go do that job and do it well. Like, be careful what you wish for.
No question.
Hey,
no
with
question.
your family now, do you have any morning or evening routines that you like, your go-tos? I know you work out a little bit, but do you have any routines that you like, your go-tos?
Yeah, so my routine's the same every day pretty much during the week. I'm fortunate that I get to bring my two oldest to school every day. I mean, I do that every day. So they got to be out of the house a little bit earlier than I remember going to school. 6:50, we're out the house, and I bring them to school. It's a 10-minute ride, not even maybe 8-minute ride, but those 8 minutes I cherish. I mean, we have some great conversations. Today we were learning about feel, and my middle daughter was reminding me how I didn't have feel in a situation. So we have some good conversation.
My
I drop them
17-year-old
off,
daughter reminds me of that a lot.
and then I come to school and I typically get a chance to work out. I'm a cardio guy in the morning, and then I try and get some lifting in at some point during the day. So get a chance to run and kind of that's my way of organizing my day. Typically I'll listen to something like this, a podcast, or maybe some music on a given day. Finish my run, I come over to the office, and my goal is we chart so many things throughout the day. My goal is that when our kids walk into our building every day, which our first kids will walk in about noon, is that everything is posted um, and on our TVs throughout the building. We have a slideshow that we do after every win. We put a photo up of every win, so to make sure those things are posted and ready to go, so that when our kids walk in the building, they see them every day. And
What
then
are you
hopefully,
valuing out of the stats that you're getting? I mean, you guys get a wealth of information. What are you valuing to show to your guys?
so I'm very careful with what I show them, but simply, I mean, a lot of the things that a lot of people value, we value quality at bats at a very high level. We put up standings, right? I put our team average, you're in green if you're above the team average, you're in red if you're not, right? Like, I want you to know exactly where you stand. Um, and then, like I told you, we really value two strikes and how you hit with two strikes. We really value the strike zone, right? So anything like chase percentage, or even more than that, I just try and show them on video. Like, I think one of the things that you can do that to kind of give yourself a little leg up is you can take an analytic and you can couple it with video, right? And
Tell a story with
I'm a
it.
visual learner,
Tell a
and most of
story
our
with it.
guys are visual learners, right? And you can sit there and talk to them about chase percentage, or you can show them when they have success, when they swing, and when they don't.
What are your guys' averages when you put the ball in play with two strikes? What's your team batting average?
I couldn't tell you today. I was just going through our stats. I got them over here, but I couldn't tell you what it is
It's like
today. But it's
350 in the
no,
big leagues.
it's yeah, it's north of 300,
It's
right?
like
It's
350 in the big leagues with two strikes. And that's the best
Yep.
defenders in the world.
Yep. Yep. So, and look, man, like, crazy stuff happens, right? All the time. You'll see it. I mean, we got the little leadoff hitter, Tommy Hawk, and I watched him with two strikes the other
Love
day,
him.
hit a ball off the plate, landed on the other side of the mound. It was like it couldn't have been but a 48-mile-an-hour exit velocity, right? And he's on first base. And
Game
when he's
rewards
on
you.
first base, it could be a triple. So, um, you know, I, so we try, we just, I, again, if I can couple the analytic with the video, um, and show you, I think we have a lot more success in understanding it.
What are some final thoughts? And by the way, I appreciate you coming on a Monday. I know you had a long weekend. You had back-to-back long weekends with 8 games and 2 weekends, but I appreciate you coming on. What are some final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, baseball season's here. We do this for a lot. We spend a lot of time. Everybody sees the 10% of the games, right? They don't see the 90% of what's done behind the scenes to make games happen. Um, I'm blessed. I mean, I'm blessed. I get to do for a living. I get to show up every day at a ridiculous facility, at an institution that values things that I value, with players that I've been fortunate enough to interact with and recruit and get to coach every single day. Um, so my final thought is, don't ever lose sight of that. Don't ever lose the appreciation for that, right? And coaches, you see it in all sports and college athletics. We're making more and more money, right? And with that comes expectation, and with expectation, sometimes they're not met. And a lot of great coaches will be out of the game this year, right? Or will lose their job. So I try to never lose that perspective of get a little bit better every day, and that's all you can control. Help your kids get a little bit better every day, and that's all you can control. So I encourage everybody that listens, or everybody that is in the game, to not lose that perspective, and try and help kids get better every day, because this is about the kids.
Thanks, Bill. I always love seeing you and love talking to you. So thank you, my friend. Appreciate you.
Likewise, Ryan, I appreciate being here. And 1 week or 2 weeks in, got a long way to go. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Keep going. One foot in
Yep,
front of the other.
sounds good.